Government enforced competition. How do you keep government from setting up monopolies? That's the real problem if you look at the real world and not at the preamble or the language of antitrust measures and similar laws.
How close are you to what Deason was saying a moment ago, though, in this area? He seemed to be arguing with you that there was a responsibility to make competition work.
The responsibility is to set up a framework of laws and of arrangements under which competition will flourish. And the most...
Inevitably flourish? I mean, or...
Well, so far as I know, I don't know of any case in history in which monopolies have been able to maintain themselves for very long without having government assistance directly come in on their side. The trade union monopolies that Mr. Deason represents would never have the kind of power they do now if it weren't for the special privileges which government has granted to them. I can perfectly well understand his being in favor of such action, of antitrust action by the government, because it really is pro-monopoly action in the main.
Why were those exemptions to monopoly laws given to unions?
Because of the political power of unions, of course. I'm not questioning that.
And because of the tremendous imbalance of power of companies at the time that unions were getting their start.
There's one concluding idea toward the end of your script that I'd like to look at because it seemed to me to be most provocative. You talked about the need for constitutional restraints on governments to prevent them interfering in foreign exchange, free markets, and in foreign trade. Now, what have you in mind, Milton, when you say constitutional restraints?
No doubt what I have in mind. If I could persuade the public, I would like it to adopt a constitutional amendment strictly parallel to the constitutional prohibition in the text of the Constitution against the central government, against state governments imposing tariffs or imposts. I would like to have a constitutional amendment which would read, the Congress shall not impose any taxes on imports or give any subsidies to exports, except such as may be necessary. I think the wording of the Constitution is that the states are permitted to do it if it's necessary for inspection. That's the excuse under which California inspects you every time you drive past to see whether you're carrying any plants or fruits or vegetables.
Milton, let me ask you a question. How long do you think that the United States would survive if the United States enacted what you would like to have?
I think the United States would prosper in a way that is hardly imaginable today. It would be an example and a beacon to the rest of the world. What kind of sense does it make? Here we are supposedly the leaders of the world. We are the ones who promote freedom and free enterprise and individual initiative. And what do? We force puny little Hong Kong to impose limits, restrictions on its exports at tariffs in order to protect our textile workers. We go to Japan and we say to Japan, for God's sakes, you got to limit the number of television sets you come out. Instead of doing that, we ought to be setting an example to the world. And if we set the kind of an example to the world that Great Britain set to the world in the 19th century, it would be have a tremendous impact. It would strengthen our moral position in the world. It would strengthen our ethical position in the world. Instead of giving money to underdeveloped countries to produce products which we then refuse to buy and don't let them export to us, we would be saying to the rest of the world, if you produce anything, if you can produce anything that can have a market here, come, we're delighted to buy it, and we'll produce things for you to buy. That's the kind of a pattern I would like to see the United States establish.
Your members buy that?
Never.
Never is a long word, sir.
Yes, you're
and
right.
You must distinguish
and one
between...
should never say never.
Your union officials would not buy it, but I am not sure your members would not.
No, my members would never buy it either. I cannot conceive of the United States setting itself up to become a target for the rest of the world.
It's not a target.
There would be absolutely nothing that would require or compel any other country to enact any reciprocal agreements relative to tariffs.
That's right.
And until such time as they had succeeded in dumping in the United States, and I use dumping in the broadest sense of the word, any and every product, either government subsidized by a foreign government, either put there because of multinational corporations, manufacturing facilities in a foreign country, until they had succeeded in absolutely draining us dry.
Draining us dry of what?
Of every asset.
How? What would they do with the dollars they got?
They'd probably buy up as they are now, as the
if they bought up.
Farmland.
Yes, yes.
Okay, let's broaden this on this very argument now, constitutional amendment argument. We've learned from our union friend he can't sell it and won't sell it. Would business buy it?
Oh, no. Speaking...
You lost a large section of the audience.
I'm not saying whether I'd buy it. I'm saying whether
no.
business would buy it, which was the question. No, when I speak not as a businessman, but as a ex-government employee, whenever proposals like that came up, one of the first things people see happen is government, business and labor come in lockstep saying, horrors, horrors, the sky's falling. There's a commonality of interest there, and people get used to what is. They get terribly conservative, and they know how to work the system the way it exists, and particularly the big unions and the big business, and they get very satisfied with it. They can manage it pretty well, and anytime you try to unravel any kind of regulation or restriction or government intrusion, they're philosophically for it, but in the practical world, they don't want you to change the drill. They've just figured out how to work this. Why should you then change it and make it all that more complicated? No, I think you'd get a good deal of reaction, just like you did out of the steel company in your television show.
And what would be international reaction, do you think, as an international economist? Supposing Milton got his amendment, constitutional amendment, which had that effect, how would other countries react to it?